For many of us out there, our security conversations with our clients have gone stale. Many of them see security as a cost and not an investment. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through some tips leveraging AI readiness as a tactic to reopen the door to those conversations and get into a new engagement model that maximizes both the security in the tenant, but also positions you as a strategic advisor to help grow their business.
So as we dive in here, guys, I want to tell a quick story around a recent client engagement that I've had. I do a lot of projects on the side for AI readiness with different clients as well as MSPs for their customers. And within here, this most recent company was a mid-sized fintech company that was growing really fast, but they really wanted to start to streamline and adopt AI. A lot of us out there have clients coming to us today saying, where do we get started? I'm hearing the buzz around this today, but how do I get going? And in a lot of cases, you'll find that they are thinking about, kind of like a chat bot on their website to answer FAQs. So that was same here with this loan FAQ chatbot that they wanted to have. They wanted the AI to be able to triage and review loan applications. They'd spend around 2 hours per loan application, and they would get about 20 per week. So they wanted to use an internal knowledge base and data source that they had around the loan criteria and underwriting guidelines to recommend an approval or rejection. And they also wanted, because they were growing so fast, an internal repository for their employees to take a look at, so that they can actually self-service a lot of the questions to get going versus dragging down productivity. So very clear business outcomes here, very great, sense of ROI for the things that AI can do well today around, faster application processing, very redundant processes that require a lot of time, not necessarily a lot of knowledge work. Reducing call volume and creating a competitive edge in their customer environment. Just like all of us out there, they had more of the information that was safe, more of the public facing that they'd answer over and over again that could be on their website versus what was in SharePoint that had some IP that related back to their underlying guidelines, loan criteria, things that they wouldn't want to surface back up to the end consumer as part of an FAQ, but do the investigations. So as part of my investigation and going into this, I'm basically saying, hey, this sounds great. Sounds like there's a good business case here. I want to do a quick check, just understand, what security could look like here, because we wouldn't want, you surfacing up some of the sensitive information to the public chatbot as an example. So I did, an hour investigation within their environment. And in most cases, you'll see this, especially around the data governance side with SMB. But there's a lot of these different facets here as it relates to, stale contractors still in the ecosystem that aren't working for the company more, being able to access customer PII that employees have in their OneDrives, as an example, a mix between sensitive and confidential data where if we were to point an AI source at it like an AI agent in Microsoft, it would be surfacing information from both stores, which wouldn't be good for us. It's a basic hygiene also in a lot of these cases too. Some users not being covered for MFA, some of the loan officers using their personal devices or personal laptops to access the sensitive data that customers were submitting as part of these loan applications. And doing just a basic network scan, we could also determine that there was 5 AI tools in use already. And that's not going to be uncommon. We can naturally assume that the employees in the organization are going to be copying and pasting company data into a tool like ChatGPT, as an example. So here I was able to go back to the executives of this business and basically say, hey, guys, I think you have a really good use case here again, but there's some basic hygiene that we need to put into place in order for this to scale appropriately, but also for you not to have the inverse of what you want to have happen. You want to create efficiencies, you want to create a great customer experience, but you wouldn't want to have them, have information surface that they're not supposed to see or create a degraded experience where you're actually making them more frustrated than if they were actually just talking to somebody. So within here, we wanted to also produce, some quick wins, right? You don't want to say, hey, in order to get you secure, I need to spend the next 6 months going through and cleaning up your entire infrastructure. That's not going to be, a quick win. They're going to get frustrated with that. And they're going to see that as a very much a cost versus the investment into, these business outcomes that they want to drive. So what we were able to do is a quick win within 14 days is isolate those FAQ documents into their own repository. That Copilot, chatbot within Copilot Studio is able to stand up to look at those documents, put that on their website so they could have a really quick win that further reinforced the buying decision for investing in this. And the conversation I had around the basic cyber hygiene and, some of the security cleanup wasn't a very long conversation. It wasn't like what we sometimes have today where you're pulling teeth to try to get clients into the security uplift or continuous improvement. This was just the cost of entry to go ahead and go achieve these larger business outcomes. And that's really the key here. That is the monumental shift of what we're trying to get into with positioning AI as your gateway to opening these conversations. So within the next 90 days, I was able to start doing some of that basic hygiene cleanup, right? Making sure their users all had MFA, making sure they were using managed devices for accessing PII or just in general to sign in. And then starting to put some basic layers of governance in place so that it had some structure to work around that you can scale out to over time, such as an AI use policy. 90 days plus, you get into some more of the ongoing engagement that you need to do that isn't going to be done in a month. And in most cases, things like sensitivity labels and data taxonomy, I have never been able to do within a 6-month time frame. Quite frankly, in the sense of that being adopted widely by the organization, managed well, and put it in a place where, it's not just we put it in a month and nobody's using it 6 months later. It's actual adoption that you want to create within there. So it's thinking about that progression, thinking about the ongoing use case, for the client, but really, coming back to how can we overcome these constraints? Why have our conversations with our customers gone stale around security? Largely, we have this frustration where clients see security as a cost and not an investment, like I was mentioning earlier. But we also haven't had a real easy time in expressing continuous improvement. And that's to say, whenever you bring up the next security project, they often come back to you and say, well, I thought that's what you were already doing for us. I thought that's what was included in our package. You haven't necessarily, educated them on the attack surface shifting, threats getting, differentiated over time, and the need to enforce new controls, right? Oftentimes, I see a lot of MSPs not monetizing for that and just doing it and spending more and more labor to do that, which is decreasing the effective rate of those clients and decreasing your profitability as a whole. And largely, this has started with the top-down executive leadership of not understanding, the importance of it unless they have pain, such as an incident. And we as MSPs often try to scramble to say, hey, this is why you need to invest in this, by talking in a lot of technical terms, by showing a lot of technical documents as an example, versus thinking about, like in this case, as that example, we were just talking about these business outcomes of what this AI tool could do. And that drove, the security conversation as, again, table stakes, cost of entry as part of that. Now, you may be thinking, as you see that example, like, hey, Nick, our MSP isn't, necessarily geared to leveraging Copilot Studio and introducing, these new agentic models or things like that. We're not experts in AI. And I think that's perfectly fine. The point here is that you're opening up the conversation to say, hey, what are you thinking about when it comes to AI adoption? If you want to get started, there's going to be some basic things, that we would want to do here. And I think a quick win is thinking about some of the business use cases where there's really repetitive tasks that can be automated very quickly with certain basic flows within there. And that's not to say that you need to be the one to do it. You could look to a strategic partner there, but fundamentally it's just getting their house in order to prepare for that moving forward. And if they already have a business case, then it's definitely easier for you to move forward there too. So this is reopening the door for us. Obviously security is increasing in the sense of the need for it here with AI increasing our risk surfaces. We've got a lot of exposure now of data loss in more than one way. Insider threat is definitely something that's more elevated today because of tools like ChatGPT and Copilot being able to surface information that's proprietary or leaking information out to non-managed sources. But largely on the right-hand side here, we have the C-suite engaged, right? And this is really the pivotal moment to position yourself, as a more of a strategic advisor, which we'll get into. And this is you positioning yourself in the middle of that adoption curve that they're going to take with or without you, as an example. So when I ask MSPs this question, where are you hearing questions from your clients today? What are their questions about AI? Largely, it's all around, there's that big buzz. I want to know how to start using it today. How do we start thinking about it? So they're looking for advice naturally. But then, there might be other businesses that, want to eliminate time-consuming workflows. They want to reduce headcount. They want to create a competitive advantage. And your gold star clients are the ones that are coming to you and saying, like, we have data concerns. We want to make sure we do this right. And they want to invest in that. Really position these clients in 3 separate buckets. It's the clients that don't know what to do, but, want to get started in some ways. There's a second client that is basically has a business goal, right? And they have a very channel focus on how they want to use AI, and they need help to go do that. And then your third client has actually gone wild, wild west and completely implemented some AI solution that largely is most likely, not secure by default as well too. So when it comes to the engagement opportunities that you have with your clients, I think there's 4 different layers, or I've positioned them in the sense of 4 different layers. And I would encourage you to think about either stepping up over time or, anchoring in on the right-hand side, which we'll get into here. The first lever here is whether or not you monetize for it. You think about security adoption, thinking about your clients that has been like pulling teeth to do the basic cyber hygiene factors like MFA as an example, or having managed devices. This is a great way to elevate them to your standard, or maybe they've been deviated before, saying it's an assumed risk, but also makes you lose sleep at night because you know that they're not adopting your best practices. And that in and of itself is a whole engagement model that you can begin to correct, but it's a great time to elevate them into these basic protections. The second layer here is project work. When you think about, obviously elevating them to a different standard, some of the projects that you'll consume here are things that largely haven't been touched before on the data side, things like data loss prevention policies, things like sensitivity labels, largely because it's been an afterthought and not really a focus point, especially not for SMB, because they don't have the concept of like a data governance officer on staff. You need to start being that for them as like a virtual data governance officer. Number 3 here is more of your add-on recurring services. So when we put these side by side, when you think about the projects that might need to be done to have secure data management for AI use within your organization, but also, the ongoing governance with that to institute AI, it's largely going to be many, many hours of work. If you think about how messy a SharePoint environment is for the average SMB, it could be hundreds of hours of labor for you to say that we need to, do to clean that up and get it to a good state. Auditing alone would take hundreds of hours in some cases. The separation here with the add-on recurring service is basically saying, hey, we can actually take that project and we can start to turn it into these microservices, which instead of a very fat fixed fee, we're going to do it as an add-on service to an existing offer. And we're slowly going to work at, getting you cleaner and doing more initiatives over time. So I really love this because it feeds back into a client engagement model where you have more frequent touch points around the wins that you're creating. You have the lack of sticker shock on the project side. It's a little bit more consumable. And a common example of this is like a data governance add-on where you're offering virtual data governance officer services. You're, monitoring their SharePoint sites over time to make sure that they're not over-permissioned, as an example. And you're getting into a layer here that you can, monetize as well too. And then the 4th layer here is more of the strategic advisory. And this is where I think the largest opportunity exists today in the sense of you as an MSP shifting from what is now getting more commodity-driven, support-driven services into value-driven services with being the trusted advisor you should be doing, as a technology expert for the business and taking the client on this AI journey. So it's thinking about, we've been in this driving the cost down to zero in some ways because of promoting help desk, as our primary service offer, right? That's largely, not necessarily unvalued in senses, but it's certainly not a differentiator that you can promote. And from a client perception, it's not what's going to take them from seeing you as just an IT vendor into a strategic business partner for them longer term. So that's broad in nature. And I think, when we talk about this and the evolution of the MSP, this is something I'm going to talk about in more videos to come. But I think this is kind of the third evolution, if I may, of the MSP, where we've moved from old break fix types of clients about, keeping your systems running, keeping you online, versus the traditional MSP, which is, we're still doing that, but we're also bundling other services to create new efficiencies for you, reduce your risk with basic cybersecurity as well too. But the modern MSP here is focused on this new lever, which is really being, again, that strategic business advisor, focusing in on unlocking revenue. We do a lot of these partner interviews now as part of a channel. And I love this quote here that you can see on the bottom from Joe Merkert, transformative IT. When people ask him at a cocktail party or wherever what he does for work, he doesn't just say, hey, we're outsourced IT for small and medium-sized businesses. He says we actually work with companies to unlock the revenue trapped inside their business. And that's such a very powerful statement to describe the level of value that he's bringing to the client, but also describes uniquely in a single sentence his entire client engagement model. It's not just, hey, we're reviewing your support tickets and seeing how fast we answered them in the quarterly business reviews, but it's looking at the business outcomes, for that client and really funneling that back out into your service delivery model as part of that. So this is large in nature, and you might be thinking, that's pretty overwhelming. You're asking me maybe to change my whole business model around this. And I think there's some stepping stones here when we talk about the opportunity at hand and how you can get started here, leveraging this opportunity with driving a conversation through AI readiness today and thinking about how you would do this with how you operate today. So first, step one is really picking your entry point. So focus on your strengths today. Are you really good at doing things like business transformation into the cloud? As an example, do you have resources staff to take people from on-prem resources into cloud-based workloads? How does productivity look on that end versus the security side, where maybe you're more MSSP focused, maybe you're more driven around a very robust cybersecurity practice that looks at risk a lot with the client. But thinking about how are we going to start packaging this and have an entry point to start the conversation with the customer? Because you could send them or create a campaign around, hey, how are you thinking about AI? We've seen other businesses do these 3 things, like automate their lead funnel, save 20 hours a week with this automation and so forth, versus, hey, how are you thinking about AI? We've seen business risk with users pasting company data into unprotected GPT models and so forth. And there's a good way to word that, but it's basically saying this is our entryway to open up the conversation. And a great example that I'll be walking through today is kind of building a generic AI readiness assessment that you can start to promote with your customers to, one, score them, but also to get them into the thought process of what are our goals today around AI? This is taking them on that journey. And the second step there is building your starter asset. So creating your initial offer, whether that's that AI readiness assessment or, hey, we'll do a 30-minute consult to understand where are the top 3 business opportunities for you for leveraging AI today, or how you can get started. Something, that has a clear deliverable that you can scale to over time. 60-minute workshop, to kind of go over that with them is a great example here too, but really keeping it simple here to start, because this is going to evolve greatly and you're not going to want to overly invest here before you start piloting and testing. So the starter asset, I'll give you guys a template for this as for AI readiness that you can use maybe to score a tenant based off of a certain posture that they have and reviewing things within their environment. And then as you package that up, as far as the clear value proposition, thinking about what is going to get them on a call with me to start talking about this. If I just say, hey, we can talk to you about AI, it's not as powerful as saying we're going to give you an AI readiness score and do an assessment with you. So we want to talk about your goals. It's clearly driving interest within there. We're saying, hey, most businesses are at a very high risk for AI. Let's see where you stand today as part of this as well too. So you want to have that value proposition, you want to have starter assets, and then you want to think about, launching this pilot and iterating with it, so that you can say, let me pick 2 customers, right? And let me test this market track out. Let me test out the messaging. Let me test out how this call goes and how they are receptive to it. And then iterate from there on what worked well, what didn't as well too. Some of these guardrails we've kind of talked about briefly, but again, you do not need to be an AI expert. You don't need to know how to build, AI automations today. You don't need to be a prompt engineer to just have a conversation with your customers about how they're thinking about AI and some of the risk involved that you can begin to address through, these different talk tracks or monetization tracks that you would have. Specialize where you have, the differentiation today. Again, maybe that's more of you have automation engineers that have evolved from support desk technicians, but maybe you have just a lot of heavy security focus and you have interest in moving into more purview knowledge, right? That would really focus in on the data governance side. But where you don't have those strengths, I would start to invest time in leveraging and working with strategic partners that could fulfill the back end of that. So thinking about AI agencies as an example of this, where you could partner with them, they're popping up all over the place, but really vetting them out, say these guys can actually build you workflow automations and do that part of it. We're going to come in and actually secure your environment as part of this as well too. So then, start with those few clients and iterate from there. But then as you think about, niching down here into AI readiness and what that actually means for a client, this is just an example of, we've set the stage and said, this is an opportunity to talk to your customers. Number two, here's a couple of steps to get started, on around the packaging and so forth. And then number three here is an example of a packaged offer that you could scale out to. And this is specifically around doing AI readiness with your customers. But there's some basic guardrails here too, where you want to have business readable categories. You don't want to scorch the earth with a bunch of technical terms. You want to be able to automate discovery of what does AI readiness mean within their tenant, right? How do I look at that and how do I scale that across my team so it's trainable and repeatable, so that we can actually scale that into a holistic business practice? You want to be able to summarize it into an executive summary for the executives to consume in a roundabout fashion. You don't want to give them the 100-page report that shows them everything that's wrong with their SharePoint environment, because their eyes are going to glaze over quickly. Just the cliff notes to get them invested into what is next. You want to drive that roadmap for continuous improvement. You want to chunk that up so that it's consumable for them. They can see, this is how we're going to progress over time. And then you want to position yourself as that guide, to take them on this AI journey. And we're your advisor to go through this. We may not be the ones implementing the automations or the AI, actual use case within your organization, but we're going to make sure it's protected. And so this asset is something I'll give to you guys as part of this video, but this is a AI readiness template that we built at Cloud Capsule. As an example, we have a scoring metric that you can leverage to score and analyze a Microsoft tenant that basically puts them from high risk all the way to AI ready. Most people are going to be at high risk, and especially in SMB, based off of what I see on average and what you guys already know too. But a lot of this is taking a bunch of controls here, like looking at their SharePoint sites for over-permissioned, anyone links, sharing settings, guest user access that's stale, dormant accounts, things like that. So how can we start at this basic cybersecurity hygiene layer, but then also look at the progression of the next steps over time, but also classify these in ways that is devoid of Microsoft speak, right? We're talking about oversharing, data protection, sensitivity and classification, access controls, and data governance. So it's kind of a lens here to see where they're at, gives them that score, much like the secure score, which most businesses relate to because it's a lot like the credit score, and it gives them a benchmark to increase as well too. So within here, you also, want to go in and highlight key findings, right? So sites detected as over-permissioned. Anyone could respond from implementing a tool like Copilot that often draws a lot of attention as well. So you can catalog these sites, and there's certainly some scripts that I've written to help automate this, and we're building automation tools in Cloud Capsule, but this is something where you're just surfacing the top level. Most all readiness engagements that I've done with different clients, I've been able to show them that they have customer PII and users OneDrives, and that alone has been enough to say, we want to invest in starting to clean this up. We're not going to, in any means, be able to do that in a month or even in 3 years, right? In some cases. That's why the ongoing engagement is what you really need to position. But thinking about this as, this is your starter asset, right? This is how we get our foot in the door. This is the asset that we deliver to the company to transpose what their risks are. And then finally, we want to talk about what is the milestone approach for the things that we need to do to get you AI ready. And this involves, again, some projects that maybe largely you haven't done as much of in lieu of doing things like Intune projects, as an example, to get managed devices or conditional access, largely ungoverned in a lot of these use cases. But as you can see here, I'm estimating some hours for a basic SMB tenant, but in some cases, this would be hundreds of hours, right, to do site sharing, cleanup. But we want to give them those quick wins over the course of that. So I like to break these up and kind of do a comparison of, hey, on this side, we could do these fixed fee projects. They're going to be high cost in nature, but we can get them done faster. or we can do this data governance add-on as part of our services, and we can get you into ongoing continuous improvement. It's going to be fixed fee each month, so it's more consumable to you today than thinking about this big cost that you probably haven't budgeted. But with that, you'll be able to see progressive improvement over time as AI evolves, as your business evolves around it, and we'll be your advisor, to tell you what's the next best thing that you can go and do, right? So it's thinking about how can we clean up enough to get them going, to get them a taste, to allow them to start to reap the benefits of that, but also allow the organization to start to learn how they can use that to drive these business outcomes and competitive advantages, and then move forward from there. So I'll link these resources in the description here as part of this blog post that I'll supplement with this video. But my challenge for you guys on this, if you've made it this far in this video, is within the next 30 days, build your initial offer and send that out to the first 2 clients you can think of that would really engage on this type of opportunity. Don't overcomplicate it. Just go out and start the conversation with the customer. Use those steps that I recommended here as the starter assets to get going, and certainly leverage a lot of the enablement content that I built around this to accelerate that path.
Okay guys, that's everything I had for you today. Definitely comment below with any questions you had. In the link in the video description is the blog post I have with all of these resources that I was chatting about as part of this presentation. Thanks guys. I'll see you next week.